Are there maybe, let's say, three big scientific facts that we know that if you're building instruction or learning, what are the things that could help people be better at creating the training that they do?
Okay, that's great. That's a great question. So, one of the big problems is that all of us, me included, try to teach too much content. We just try to force. We think we got to get these 100 things across, right? So the problem with that is we're not giving those 100 things the instructional supports they need, right? So our learners may be going up a learning curve, but then they're falling down a forgetting curve. So it'd be better to focus on the things that are most important. And one of the things that people miss the most in all this is in our learning designs, is we forget to focus on remembering, right? Now, let's think about it. If we get people to understand, if they develop the right mental models of what we're trying to teach them, but they can't remember it in a week or a month, have we done anything of value? Not as much as we'd like to do, right? So it's key for us not to just develop understanding, but also to support remembering. Now, the three things that the research suggests we do in supporting remembering is, number one, align the learning and performance context. In other words, try to simulate if you can. Because what happens is, it's not, we're not like computers. We learn in contexts, and the contexts, then our performance context, our on-the-job performance context, should remind us of what we need to remember, right? So if you simulate something, the contextual cues are in that simulation that will be in the workplace. And then when you get into the workplace, if you've simulated, you're more likely to remember people. So let me tell you the science behind it. They have people learn in room A or in room B. If you learn something in room A, you're better able to remember it in room A than in room B, and vice versa. They've done this with scuba divers. If you learn something 30 feet underwater, you're better able to remember it 30 feet underwater than on land, and vice versa. But it's not just visual contextual cues, it's music. If you learn listening to Mozart, you're better able to remember listening to Mozart than listening to jazz, and vice versa. If you learn when it's quiet, you're better able to remember when it's quiet than when it's sad, and vice versa. If you learn smelling peppermint, you're better able to remember smelling peppermint than osmanthus, and vice versa. This is a fundamental aspect of human cognition. So you can see the learning context should be aligned with the performance context. That's one thing we can do to support remembering. The second thing is to give people practice in retrieving information the way they would retrieve it on the job.
So not in a multiple choice test.
Exactly. I was just going to go into that. Well, you can have good multiple choice tests, but most of us don't create those. But the key there is to make it realistic practice, right? If we can give them a real world task, that's the best thing. If we can't do that, we simulate. If we can't do that, we give them a scenario-based question that has good context behind it. But it's, a lot of us do the wrong thing. We hear the word, we got to have interactivity.
Right.
Hey, dude, man, let's get some interactivity. Well, no, that's not what you need. We have to know more about, we have to utilize what we know about human learning. So let's make sure that we provide them realistic retrieval practice in the context that's right. So those are the first two things. The third thing is the spacing effect. If we space repetitions over time, it really supports long-term remembering. The opposite is cramming. Did you ever cram for an exam in college?
I was horrible at it. I'm a world's worst test taker, and cramming did me no good.
It did you no good? Well, it's supposed to work. So spacing. The spacing is really interesting. It's one of the most studied phenomenon in learning research, but it's very rarely used in now, I shouldn't say that. It's beginning to bubble up. There's a lot of now, one of the things I'm pushing these days is this notion of subscription learning. That people subscribe to a thread that has a series of small events, less than 5 to 10 minutes, and then you space the repetitions of the key concepts over time. And when I say repeat, I don't mean verbatim repetition. That would be boring and nobody pay attention, but something interesting. I think that this spacing thing is going to be an opportunity now for learning designers to figure out how to make it work. And again, none of these things are panaceas,
Right.
right? And we have motivated learners, we have unmotivated learners. We have to do different things for different groups. But the key is to have more tools in your toolbox. And those three things I mentioned, context alignment, retrieval practice, and spacing, are three things that help people remember. Now, again, remembering is not enough either, right? Then you need the after training support. But that's a whole that's a whole
That's a
nother
whole nother conversation, right?
right, right.
Awesome. Well, you know what? Let's wrap this up. And you mentioned when we were talking beforehand that you have a book coming out. What tell us a little bit about that.
The title of the book is called Performance Focused Smile Sheets, a radical rethinking of a dangerous art form. It's coming out in the next 6 months or so. It's still in the editing process. In fact, I was editing right before we talked, going over the editor's changes. And here's the thing. There's really good research that shows that our smile sheets are completely uncorrelated with our learning results. Completely uncorrelated. So what that means is, and most of us rely on smile sheets more than anything else. And so we're getting bad feedback. That's where we get our feedback on how good our learning is. And yet it tells us nothing. And we're in the dark, basically.
Yeah.
We're completely in the dark. So I said, smile sheets aren't great. You really want to do more than smile sheets, right? But if we're going to use them, why don't we make them better?
Yeah.
So I've taken what I've known about human learning, thinking about how to redesign a smile sheet, and I put it into this book. And it's a long conversation. We can have another one, but I'm looking forward to see how the field reacts to it. When I go and talk to people about this, they go, "Oh, this is great! We get this. Why were we doing it this way all along?"